I'm sorry, please break up with me. There's something I've been hiding from you. These were the words Atlas, my husband, suddenly told me. We had been married for 6 months, with no significant arguments, and though we hadn't had children yet, we had been enjoying our time together as a couple. This sudden revelation left my mind in turmoil, wondering why an affair? A hidden child, perhaps? Various thoughts raced through my mind as I tried my best to maintain composure, while asking, why cheating? Could it be a hidden child? My father had some debts, and I've been paying them off. I always meant to tell you before we got married, but I was afraid if I did, you'd refuse to marry me because of it, so I couldn't bring myself to tell you. Since Atlas's father had passed away before our marriage, I had never met him and knew very little about him. I had never imagined that he had debts during his lifetime. How much debt are we talking about? I asked hesitantly. $30,000. $30,000? My mind went blank once more. I had quit my job when I got married, since my previous job required frequent business trips and relocations. Atlas and I had planned for her to find work closer to home before starting a family, but now I realized I shouldn't have quit her job. It was too late for regrets. I had some savings from my single days, but it wouldn't be enough to cover the entire debt, let alone for a down payment on a house, the wedding we hadn't held yet, and the children we both wanted. We had been saving diligently for our dreams of the future. Seeing me silent, Atlas hesitantly added, "My mom, she's in the hospital." Atlas had grown distant from his mother, and I had never met her. From what I had heard, his mother was quite strict, and he had a difficult time adjusting to her parenting methods. When we first started dating, it was as if she was a toxic parent. Apparently, Atlas had received news from relatives that his mother had been hospitalized. With my father's debts and my mom in the hospital. I can see that. It's only going to cause more trouble for you, Valentina, if I continue down this path with you. It might be too late now, but I don't want to bring any more hardships into your life. I couldn't forgive the fact that he hid his debt from me when we got married. But upon further reflection, I realized that Atlas himself wasn't at fault. The real culprit was his late father, who left behind the debt. Furthermore, his estranged, yet only living relative, his mother's illness. Seeing Atlas try to shoulder all of this on his own, I felt a genuine desire to support him as his wife. We're a married couple, and in times like this, how can we not support each other? Let's get through this together. Valentina. I smiled at Atlas, who seemed lost in thought. But from now on, no more secrets, okay? Thank you, Valentina. And so, we decided to continue our married life as it was. I thought that this experience would deepen our bond as a couple. At least, that's what I believed at the time. From that day on, Atlas started going back to his hometown frequently. The hospital where his mother was admitted was near his family home. It took about 2 hours by car from our apartment to the hospital. Initially, he would make day trips on weekends, but gradually, he began staying overnight at his family home and coming back. How is your mother-in-law doing? She's not doing very well. Seeing Atlas come back exhausted from juggling work and taking care of her, I wanted to do something to help. I started looking for a job while working part-time at a nearby supermarket. If we could at least get rid of the debt, Atlas's burden might lighten a bit. However, with my part-time salary, it's a struggle just to pay off the interest. I've been getting anxious about landing a full-time job, but it's not happening as quickly as I'd hoped. After much consideration, I decided to turn to my parents. My father runs a company, and I thought that if we could secure some money, it might alleviate Atlas's financial strain. However, my father didn't have the best impression of Atlas. He never explicitly opposed our marriage, but he had expressed dissatisfaction with the fact that Atlas was estranged from his mother, and that we had registered our marriage without a wedding. Asking my father to lend money to Atlas was, understandably, difficult. Despite my hesitation, I mustered the courage to call my parents. "Hello, Mom?" My mother answered the phone first, which gave me some relief. "Valentina, what's wrong? Did you have a fight with Atlas?" "No, we're getting along just fine. I have a different matter to discuss." "A matter to discuss?" "Of course, I'm listening." "Could I come over tomorrow when Dad is home?" "Of course, dear." "Will you stay for dinner?" "Is Atlas coming too?" "Yeah, he's probably not coming with me." "All right, we'll be waiting." After ending the call with my mother, I called Atlas. "Hello, what's up?" Finally, after the 7th call, Atlas answered. "Busy, huh? I'm planning to go to my parents' place tomorrow. If you can make it, it would be great if you joined me." "Sorry, it's not possible." From the other end of the phone, I could hear the presence of many people. I couldn't make out what was being said, but there was laughter in the background. "Atlas, where are you now?" I asked in wonder, and then I heard a woman's voice from the side. "Is this your wife?" "I'm Carter, the nurse in charge of your mother. Your husband needs to go listen to the doctor's explanation of your mother's condition. Is it all right with you?" "I see, sorry for the interruption." "Thank you." Intimidated by the stern tone of the nurse, I quickly hung up the phone. The hospital was surprisingly bustling. I had a vague feeling of unease, but as I began to think about the following day, I completely forgot about it. My family home is about a 30-minute drive from the apartment where we currently live. If we were to have a child, we thought it would be reassuring if my family was closer, so I took Atlas's suggestion and settled nearby. My father's advice was, now that you have your own family, don't come back to your parents' house too often. So I used to visit, only about once a month. But recently, with Atlas often away, I had been going back more frequently. After finishing dinner and relaxing in the living room, my mother asked first, "It's unusual for you to come to us with a problem. What's going on?" Thinking about where to start, I continued, "Well, you see, Atlas's mother is in the hospital." My parents were surprised to hear about Atlas's mother. "Atlas was distant from his mother, wasn't he?" "Yes, but he can't just abandon her. Right now, he's staying at the family home near the hospital, so he hardly comes back to our apartment." "I see. But that doesn't mean he should neglect Valentina." Deep wrinkles formed on my father's forehead. "Come on, Dad, it's okay. It was a decision we made as a couple." "Right, if it's a decision you two made, there's no need for us to interfere. My dear, your father and I have been through a lot in recent years, but we managed because we helped each other. So, you've got this." My mother's heartfelt words left me feeling puzzled. My parents had always had a great relationship, and I had never seen them argue. My mother was technically a homemaker, but she also helped out at my father's company. Could there have been something like a crisis in their relationship, even with my parents, who seemed to be doing well both personally and professionally. Mom, Dad, did something big happen with you too, the lovebirds? My father coughed, as if to hide his embarrassment before answering. I didn't want to worry you, but the truth is, my company has been struggling for the past few years. It's only recently that we've managed to secure some major contracts, and there's hope for a turnaround. My father sounded upbeat, but my feelings sank. The company? I had no idea that it had been in such a state. A few years ago, I was living on my own, having settled into my working life, and I had no clue about my father's company's financial troubles. I had taken to heart his words that he didn't need financial support from me when I started working, so during my single days, I used my earnings solely for myself. He didn't want to tell you, to avoid worrying you, Valentina. If only they had told me, I might have been able to help in some way. Not knowing, I felt ashamed of myself. So, Valentina, you're always welcome to come back if you need anything, okay? My father said in a tone that could be taken as a joke or seriousness. Dad, don't worry. I'll be coming with Atlas next time. After hearing that, what did you want to discuss? It was impossible to bring up the topic of my husband's debt after hearing their conversation. Well, it's about our married life. I was feeling a bit unsure about it, but after talking to you both, I feel more at ease. Thank you. In the end, that day, we had a lighthearted conversation and left. As we were leaving, my father emphasized, if anything happens, don't hesitate to rely on your parents. A few days after my visit to my parents' house, I was called to my father's company due to an urgent matter. I was ushered into the president's office, where my mother, who had come to help at the company, and an unfamiliar woman were present. This is Blakely Taylor, the president of one of our business partners, my father introduced the woman to me. Nice to meet you. My father is always grateful for your support, I greeted her, and Blakely Taylor responded with a gentle smile. I learned from my father and Blakely about the purpose of my visit and proceeded with the discussion about future plans. Then, unusually, I received a call from Atlas. Valentina, I'm sorry. My mother is in critical condition, and it seems I won't be able to come home for a while. I'm really sorry for causing you trouble. Atlas's voice was on the verge of tears. He seemed to be in a desperate situation on the other end of the phone. How is your mother's condition? If things settle down, do you think you can come home for a bit? I don't know what will happen. If I had been more filial, maybe things wouldn't have come to this. Atlas on the other end of the smartphone spoke with a voice tinged with regret, as if he were muttering his feelings. In contrast to Atlas's emotional state, I calmly responded, I see. I'll let your mother know, seeing as she's beside me right now. Huh? My father had mentioned earlier that the major business partner was none other than the company run by Atlas's mother. I didn't know, but my mother's maiden name was Taylor. Blakely Taylor was my mother-in-law. I had only learned this fact a few hours ago when I was called into the company and told about it immediately. By coincidence, a conversation between me and my mother-in-law, who had come to the company for a meeting, went well, and my parents decided to take the opportunity to have lunch with her, which was meant to foster good relations. During that time, the topic of children came up, and it was the trigger for my parents to discover that their business partner was their daughter's mother-in-law. My mother-in-law, who didn't even know that her estranged son had gotten married, was greatly surprised to learn that her son's spouse was the daughter of their current business partner. To convey this fact, my father hastily summoned me to the company, and that brings us to the present. I never expected to meet my mother-in-law in this way. And in a situation where my former mother-in-law was right beside me, Atlas said, "My mom is critically ill and won't be able to come home for a while." "My mother is right here? What are you saying?" "She's in critical condition, and she's sleeping next to me." "You haven't even met my mother. What are you confusing here?" Indeed, as Atlas pointed out, I had never met my mother-in-law. Although we had submitted the marriage papers, we hadn't yet had a wedding ceremony. I had always expressed my desire to meet Atlas's mother, but he had consistently declined, citing his estranged relationship with his mother. "So, who is this person?" I switched to a video call and showed Atlas the person next to me. "I have no idea who that is." There, undeniably, was his own mother on the screen. Atlas saw it and, for a brief moment, seemed flustered. But he quickly composed himself and attempted to play it off. "You're saying you don't know your own mother?" "Yeah, I don't know her." Even at this point, he was unyielding, frustrating me with his lack of acknowledgement. Atlas seemed intent on maintaining his denial, adopting a defiant attitude, even towards me. "You claim to support me, but in reality, you've prepared a substitute, because you wanted to leave me, haven't you?" "What are you talking about?" Was this the gentle Atlas I knew? His attitude was incredibly disrespectful to my mother-in-law. My anger reached its peak due to Atlas's attitude. However, what gently restrained me, as I attempted to confront Atlas, was my mother-in-law, who pulled out a thick envelope. "What's this all about?" she asked, displaying the contents of the envelope through the screen. It contained numerous pictures of Atlas with unfamiliar women. My mother-in-law continued by showing pictures of a woman on her own from another envelope. "Do you recognize this woman?" Atlas briefly glanced at the woman in the photo. "This one, her name is Gemma Carter. She's an employee at our company." Listening to the exchange between my mother-in-law and Atlas, I sensed something was amiss. "This girl complained to me that she's been recently harassed by a stalker-like man. So I investigated, and I never thought that man would be my own son. I was already surprised that he secretly got married, but to think he's even cheating," my mother-in-law said, and a hint of panic briefly appeared on Atlas's face. I also asked Atlas, "Hey, what was the name of the nurse?" I remembered. It was the nurse who answered the phone when I called Atlas. She had indeed introduced herself as Gemma Carter. Well, who remembers the name of a nurse like that?" Contrary to what I had heard from Atlas about the estrangement being caused by his mother's strictness, the reality was quite different. According to my mother-in-law, Atlas had been involved in gambling and womanizing since his 20s, hanging out with a bad crowd and causing trouble. Despite her desperate efforts to stop him, he ended up in a police case, and she disowned him. Atlas had been blaming everything on his mother and lying about the true reasons. It turned out that his frequent trips back to his hometown weren't to check on his mother, but to meet with his affair partner, Gemma Carter. Additionally, he had been going out with his old buddies for gambling. Gemma had grown tired of Atlas and had initiated a breakup discussion, but Atlas's constant stalking made her fear for her safety. She sought help from her company's boss, who happened to be my mother-in-law, leading to a full investigation. "With this evidence, you can squeeze a substantial settlement from him." "Valentina, you should divorce my son and start fresh with your life." In response to my mother-in-law's words, I made the decision to divorce Atlas. "Hey, don't rush into things. Men are creatures who cheat. Please forgive me." Finally, a word that seemed like an apology came from Atlas through the screen, but there was no hint of remorse, just a hint of a mocking smile, which made me doubt his sincerity. Everyone present was taken aback by Atlas's attitude. Still, he seemed to be under the mistaken impression that he still had some affection left in me. When my mother-in-law approached the screen, she pointed at Atlas and delivered another blow, saying, "The investigation has more to it. Listen carefully." Atlas's misconduct was not limited to infidelity and gambling. The investigation revealed a trail of fraudulent activities he had committed within his company. Surprisingly, my mother-in-law's company had business dealings with Atlas's company, and he had used his position as the son of an important client to manipulate situations. This included blaming his subordinates for mistakes, exerting pressure on his superiors, and embezzling company funds to repay the gambling debts. "We cannot continue doing business with a company that has such an employee. I have informed the other party to take the necessary actions." Finally realizing the gravity of the situation, Atlas turned pale and desperately pleaded with my mother-in-law. "I'm your only son. Please let me off the hook. If you fire me and I divorce Valentina, it will be the end of me." "Your only son?" My mother-in-law approached the screen and examined Atlas's face closely. "You're not my son. I don't know this person." In a cold, detached tone, she declared, "What are you talking about? Mother? I don't have a son like you. Are you confusing me with someone else?" My mother-in-law echoed Atlas's words from earlier, ending the video call abruptly. After that, Atlas was quite reluctant to agree to the divorce. I thought it might drag on indefinitely, but thanks to the high-powered lawyer that my mother-in-law found, the divorce was finally granted. Atlas faced legal complaints from the women he had been involved with. In addition to his gambling debts, he had to pay compensation to these women, separately from what he owed me, leaving him in a financial nightmare. He lost his job, and his embezzlement became public, leading to the likelihood of legal complaints against him as well. Meanwhile, my own job search wasn't going well, and I hit rock bottom. It was no longer my concern. On the other hand, I started working for my father's company. I had a connection to Ms. Taylor, my former mother-in-law, in her capacity as the head of our business partner. My former mother-in-law apologized to me once again, expressing regret for how she had raised her son and the inconvenience she had caused me. She offered her support and told me that, if I ever needed help or advice, she would be there for me. While she may have made mistakes in raising her son, thanks to her help, my father's company was able to rebuild itself during those crucial times. If it hadn't been for her presence at that time, I might have still been stuck in a deceitful and miserable married life. Fortunately, we didn't have children, so I could return to being single without many difficulties. I attribute the ability to start a fresh life while the wounds were still fresh to her. In retrospect, perhaps my encounter with Atlas was meant to be, to enable my encounter with my former mother-in-law. Today, I can't help but feel a bit grateful to Atlas as well.